Hey everybody. All right, I'm going to just take a minute to show you a couple of things that you can do with the PDF, right? So that's going to be on the next slide. To download the PDF, all you need to do is if you just kind of click and you look over here and you got this button that says download, boom. That is how you can save the PDF, and you can save it to your desktop. That's fine. This just says icon original. I don't know why, but you could just say Beowulf first part, right? And then you can save it. It's gonna download for you, and then that's where it'll be. So it's pretty neat, right? Okay. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read The Wrath of Grendel. I'm going to do a close reading of The Wrath of Grendel, and what I'm looking for is the exposition, pieces of exposition that occur in this section. All right, so here we go. The Wrath of Grendel. A powerful monster living down in the darkness growled in pain, impatient as day after day the music rang loud in that hall, the harp's rejoicing call, and the poet's clear song sung of the ancient beginnings of us all, recalling the Almighty making the earth, shaping these beautiful plains marked off by oceans, then proudly setting the sun and moon to glow across the land and light it. The corners of the earth were made lovely with trees and leaves, made with quick life, with each of the nations who now move on its face. And then, as now, warriors sang of their pleasure, so Hrothgar's men lived happy in this hall. Until the monster stirred, that demon, that fiend, Grendel, who haunted the moors, the wild marshes, and made his home in a hell, not hell but earth. He was spawned in that slime, conceived by a pair of those monsters born of Cain, murderous creatures banished by God, punished forever for the crime of Abel's death. The Almighty drove those demons out, and their exile was bitter. Shut away from men, they split into 1,000 forms of evil, spirits and fiends, goblins, monsters, giants, a brood forever opposing the Lord's will, and again defeated. Then, when the darkness had dropped, Grendel went up to Hero, wondering what the warriors would do in that hall when their drinking was done. He found them sprawled in sleep, suspecting nothing, their dreams undisturbed. The monster's thoughts were as quick as his greed or his claws. He slipped through the door, and there in the silence snatched up 30 men, smashed them, unknowing in their beds, and ran out with their bodies, the blood dripping behind him, back to his lair, delighted with the night's slaughter. At daybreak, with the sun's first light, they saw how well he had worked, and in that gray morning broke their long feast with tears and laments for the dead. Hrothgar, their lord, sat joyless in Hero, a mighty prince mourning the fate of his lost friends and companions, knowing by its tracks that some demon had torn his followers apart. He wept, fearing the beginning might not be the end. And that night Grendel came again, so set on murder that no crime could ever be enough, no savage assault quench his lust for evil. Then each warrior tried to escape him, searched for rest in different beds as far from Hero as they could find, seeing how Grendel hunted when they slept. Distance was safety. The only survivors were those who fled him. Hate had triumphed. So Grendel ruled, fought with the righteous, won against many, and won. So Hero stood empty and stayed deserted for years. 12 winters of grief for Hrothgar, king of the Danes, sorrow heaped at his door by hell-forged hands. His misery leaped the seas, was told and sung in all men's ears. How Grendel's hatred began, how the monster relished his savage war on the Danes, keeping the bloody feud alive, seeking no peace, offering no truce, accepting no settlement, no price in gold or land, and paying the living for one crime only with another. No one waited for reparation from his plundering claws. The shadow of death hunted in the darkness, stalked Hrothgar's warriors, old and young, lying in waiting, hidden in mist. invisibly following them from the edge of the marsh, always there, unseen. So mankind's enemy continued his crimes, killing as often as he could, coming alone, bloodthirsty and horrible, though he lived in Hero. When the night hid him, he never dared to touch King Hrothgar's glorious throne, protected by God. God, whose love Grendel could not know, but Hrothgar's heart was bent. The best and most noble of his council debated remedies, sat in secret sessions, talking of terror, and wondering what the bravest of warriors could do. And sometimes they sacrificed the old stone gods, made heathen vows, hoping for hell's support, the devil's guidance in driving their affliction off. That was their way, and the heathen's only hope. Hell always in their hearts, knowing neither God nor his passing as he walks through our world, the Lord of heaven and earth. Their ears could not hear his praise, nor know his glory. Let them beware. Those who are thrust into danger, clutched at by trouble, yet can carry no solace in their hearts, cannot hope to be better. Hail to those who will rise to God, drop off their dead bodies, and seek our Father's peace. That is the end of the first section. So let's talk about what elements of exposition that we have here. We go to the very start of this poem. Obviously, it's titled The Wrath of Grendel. So we don't know yet who or what Grendel is, but we get this from the very first line, the powerful monster, right? And we're giving elements of the setting from where he comes from. He comes from the darkness, he growls in pain, he's impatient. And then it transitions to harps rejoicing in a loud hall, and you get the poet's clear songs that are sung in ancient beginnings of us all. So what this does is it illustrates for us that we are at the beginning of an epic, and it resonates that way, right? Epics were through storytellers, and in some ways, sometimes they were sung. And you might have Beowulf, might have been, it was definitely oral tradition. It was definitely passed down through that storytelling. And sometimes it might have been sung, like a minstrel would have played and would have gone through, and it would have had its like merry little jingle or whatever. So this is reiterating that fact that we have Grendel who's stalking the darkness, right? He's there. And then it transitions immediately to singing in a hall, and the songs are about the beginnings. So we have this beginning in the beginning. And so you have this picture of all of these men of Hrothgar who are living happy, who are drinking, who are singing in the hall, and they're telling the tales of the beginning of Earth and how nations formed. This is exemplary of what the epic poem would do, right? It's just reminding, hey, everything's great for just a little bit, and then darkness is going to fall. So with the next section where we have the monster stirring and the demon, the fiend, what we have here are, it's giving us background information on Grendel. So Grendel has his home in a hell, right? He was spawned in that slime. What does spawn mean? Well, if you've had your biology, you know that that means basically he was birthed in that slime. Okay, but even the idea of spawned kind of gives him a more monstrous beginning, if you will. Okay, because it's definitely like this kind of slippery, slimy, dark muckiness that he's coming from. And we also get how he was conceived, a pair of those monsters born of Cain. And for those of you who need the footnote, right? Cain is the oldest son of Adam and Eve who murdered his brother Abel. So think about this. We have multiple beginnings that are exemplified here, right? So we have what we just talked about, all of these Hrothgar's men in the hall that are singing, and they're talking about the beginnings of the earth and of mankind. Then we also have this reference right here going to Cain, and Cain is who? The son of Adam and Eve. And who were Adam and Eve? Well, in the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve were the first two people created in God's image in the Garden of Eden. Another reference to a beginning, except here things take a turn for the worse, right? Because Cain murders his brother, And so that's where we get sort of the one of the first glimpses of dark and evil in the world. And so anything that comes from Cain is monstrous, evil. And so then this is how you have this tie-in. Um, and then the Almighty drove those demons out. Exile was bitter, shut away from men. They split into 1,000 forms of evil, spirits, fiends, goblins, monsters, giants, right? So we are now getting even more exposition about how Grendel came to be. And it was because of this drastic sin that Cain performed that spawned all of this evil into the world. Then you get the scene where Grendel attacks Hero. And so here this sets up what I would say is part of the rising action. We get our first moment of conflict. The severity of that event sets in motion a number of different things. And so we both have this rising action that starts, boom, right? Grendel attacks Hrothgar's men, kills many, takes them back to their lair. Also find out that because of the attack that it happens again and it happens again and it always happens at night when they're sleeping, and they lie in wait for them. They try to fight them off, but Grendel wins every time. So what they find out is that since Grendel hunts while they sleep, right? Distance is safety. That's what they figure. So a lot of people just leave Hero because they're safer elsewhere, and that's how they survive. So Grendel wins. Grendel basically scared off everybody. And so Hrothgar's kingdom sat empty and desolated for years. And the story of what happened at Hero ends up going across the pond, right? And men start telling of this story. So again, we have another instance of a beginning of a story, a recount of exposition, like, oh, let me tell you what happened to Hrothgar. Have you heard? Oh my goodness, right? So now we get even more exposition as to how the scene is set up for Beowulf's arrival. And so because this story reaches Beowulf, then he's like, hey, wait a minute, there might be something I can do about that. So that is how you would do a close reading in regards to the first section of the story, and especially with how you'd pinpoint exposition. What elements do we see here that provide us with the backstory, and how does this set it up for everything that's going to happen and roll in motion as we have our rising action? So the next slide, you have your PDF. I just demonstrated how to download it, but just to recap, when you get there, if you hover up here, you will have the download button. You click that and you're able to save it. Then you can reference that for the assignment, so that you'll have it when you need to flip back and forth. But what I want you to do for today is you're going to focus on the coming of Beowulf, and you are going to find the places where you see Beowulf's name. And where you see that happen, then you're going to look for the descriptors of Beowulf. So here we have Higlac's follower and strongest of the Geats. Okay, so I'm giving you one right off the bat. So yes, you can use this. So what you would do is write that down, and you want to get your line number. So this is line 110, and that's good. And so then you would write down Beowulf, comma, Higlac's follower and strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in the world. Okay, that's what you need. And then you're just going to basically say, hey, the poet is portraying Beowulf as this over the top superhero type of character, and this is what sets that archetype for the hero, right? He is stronger than anyone anywhere in the world. And that's it. Then you move on to the next one. So you're looking for other places where you see the name Beowulf. And when you see the name Beowulf, then you are looking for what comes around that. Chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest of the Geats, 14 in all, right? So what is he doing? And why does that matter? And how does that describe Beowulf and his followers? That's what you're going to do. So as you read The Coming of Beowulf, you're looking for where Beowulf is mentioned, and you're looking for what descriptions are happening around Beowulf. You're writing those down. getting your line number, and then you're going to enter that into your final slide, give you time to type that out, and then you're basically just going to give your reasoning as to why it's important. Boom. All right, good luck.